Okay, Carolyn, ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we got
All right,
it.
go ahead and call this special meeting of City Council to order, March 9th, 2020, 7 p.m. here at Idalong Governor Memorial Library. I'd like to welcome county commissioners here to this special meeting, and we have City Council over here and Carolyn Dunn from Economic Development. So please, Carolyn, go ahead.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
You
They
have to
actually have to
our
call their
meeting to
meeting.
order.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Okay. We'll call the meeting to order for the Stafford County Board of Commissioners as well. And turn it over to Carolyn. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Well, I didn't make name placards, but I don't know, is it a given that each person knows each other? Maybe just a quick introduction of yourself before we
Okay.
start.
Kurt Fairchild, St. John.
Clay Grimmett.
Todd Wyckoff.
Mark Bryant, St. John.
Marshall Sanders, St. John.
Brian Christie.
Visay Macias.
Ross Fisher, St. John.
Thank you. Well, I thought maybe to kind of start it off, to kind of give some context about how this came to be. If you'll recall, I approached City Council in January about donations of land related to a grant application that we were putting forth for some housing development. And that conversation kind of continued into the idea of working on other economic development goals as well. That top, including industrial development, I guess, is what I wanted to point out. That's a topic we've also discussed at the county level. I suggested something to consider would be to share the cost of a site selection or preliminary engineering analysis, which led to a lot of differing ideas within City Council even about locations to consider. It put me in a position of kind of being a translator, and the groups agreed that direct conversation would be worthwhile. I'll mention that while the cost of that study is partly what brought us here, I found a company that's willing to do the work for a fraction of the cost that we were initially looking at, and the county has voted to move forward with the analysis. I have, however, waited to give specific instructions to the firm about locations until after this meeting, depending on what kinds of things end up being discussed here tonight. So we can talk about that specifically, or I think it might be productive to start more broadly. It's not often that we make the effort to have a joint meeting with a strategic purpose, and I don't believe either body is working from a formal strategic planning document currently. With the idea in mind that any discussion about strategic planning is better when informed by data, we have done some work to collect some data that we can share with you tonight. In particular, we have done a survey of county residents. We have deployed it countywide, although for tonight's meeting, we have sorted it so that only the responses by the zip code 67576 are what we are sharing with you tonight. This was intended to be, just a survey of general economic development priorities. And the handout has both the questions that were asked as well as the results on the second page. We deployed this by social media. It's on our website. We deployed it by Facebook. We worked with some other agencies like schools to also share that. We have gone to some events in person. For example, there was that pancake feed in Hudson last week, and we collected about 50 surveys there. We've gone to businesses directly and dropped off surveys. We sent it home in the backpacks of all the kids in elementary school in St. John. It was in the city bill, it wasn't a direct link to this, it's obviously paper, but it told you where you could go to take the survey. So, again, this is your meeting. We can talk about something specific. We can talk more broadly about economic development goals. You know, you've got that just right there to kind of start digesting, but maybe a place to begin would be to have each of you give me some feedback on what you'd like to see out of tonight's meeting. What would you consider success? You know, we deliberately set up this room such that, you know, it's intended to facilitate some open discussion between you all. In fact, one of the pieces of feedback I'd had, you know, before setting up this meeting was don't make it us versus them, and that's very much the intent, is to have this be a back and forth kind of discussion and exchange of ideas.
On this, Carolyn, it says answered on the top 87. Is that the number?
That's the number of people that responded.
Participated.
So, you know, it's not something that's closed out yet. We would like to, I think, in our mind, have a goal of 300 responses countywide. You know, it's taking, a lot of times people aren't answering it unless we ask them directly. But, you know, if we get 10% of the population that's of voting age, you know, take out those 18 and under. If we got 10%, maybe that's not a bad sampling. And it's going to take some more effort to get to that point. But and when I say, I think we're at about 150 right now. 87 responses, again, are sorted by that zip code 67576. Do you have kind of expectations of what this kind of process can bring? Do you have, I mean, it's okay, I mean, we can move on, but I want to also, you know, I don't want this to be something that you walk away from going, well, that's not what I wanted to do, or what I wanted to accomplish. I think we all know we're here to talk about strategic priorities, but that's...
You know, it seems, at least my understanding of the project that we're talking about, I mean, it's a rail spur, or we've been either talking about putting up a grain facility on it, or getting like a warehouse. We went and toured a couple of two warehouse sites in Wichita, where it's basically renting out warehouse sites or areas of the warehouse. And I don't think we'd be in the business of running it, but it'd be more building it and then like renting it to one of the companies that we toured in Wichita. You know, we're kind of looking at 3 sites now. I think the one would be just south of town, the quarter that Mid-Kansas Ag sits on. It would be Sandyland out there 2 miles south on the junction. And then we had also discussed north of Stafford where the pellet mill Tyson used to be. And I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at. They all have pluses, you know. The one in Stafford already has a spur. You know, it doesn't have much ground, but the people around it are willing to sell ground. The plus about Sandyland out there is that we already own it. We wouldn't have to buy anything, you know, for the ground. Then the plus, I mean, with St. John, you know, right outside of town, it'd be close to the railroad, but we'd have to buy ground there. I don't know how the county and city could work together. I guess if there is one thing that I'd like to know about, you know, come out of this meeting is what could the county and city do together to make one site better than another site.
I guess, Carolyn, at the last meeting, you basically, I think, said that as far as utilities, them using utilities from us, because that's what initially what I thought is we were going to have it closer to town so we could provide utilities, but you're saying that's not even an option, that they buy it at wholesale, the electrical?
I'm not sure I'm following exactly what you're saying. Like, you're saying...
Providing the water, sewer, electrical to them, but you're saying they probably wouldn't do that.
Well,
a big company like that.
yeah, I think, well, you're maybe I should, we're kind of getting into details now, so maybe I should step ahead, either that or probe you for what more you want to get at. You want to get out of tonight's meeting. What I heard out of that is kind of a focus on a particular project. Is that?
I was just getting that,
Yeah,
he
because
brought
of-
up location, so
is
that's
that-
why.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
why I brought that
initially
question.
you had approached the city on spending 20,000 for a feasibility study,
Right.
whether this would even be feasible.
Right.
My biggest concern about spending $20,000 of city taxpayer money is it's just a feasibility study that may come back and say, well, it's not feasible to do it, and we spent 20,000 for nothing. I want to make sure the citizens understand that if we spend 20,000, we may never get a return on it. Because it's not
And-
going to directly benefit us through utilities, water, or sewer.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
But that has
Okay,
changed.
and that, the point, the idea of the cost, okay, so we found a engineering firm that did work with, Hayes got a couple of build grants, so they've had experience in this type of planning and funding, applications, and they agreed to do a basic sites comparison, so not precise, but cost estimates, and some, it would be layout from satellite imagery. They would be out surveying it and doing exact kind of measurements, but they're willing to do it for $5,000. So we thought that maybe would be a good place
But
to get
is
to
that
it.
just a site study, or is that a feasibility study?
Well,
Because there's a difference there.
Well,
I
no,
mean,
it's
this-
not preliminary. When you're talking about site selection, that is sort of, I think, a feasibility study. That's my interpretation of it anyway. That's kind of telling you, well, this one's going to be, a lot more cost because you're going to have to do more work with the road, to this one's going to be more cost because you have to do more dirt work. I mean, some of that is, to me, the feasibility of the construction. It's not going to be feasibility of how much traffic it gets to be, cost effective, the cost benefit
Right.
analysis essentially.
But would the first one that was gonna cost 40,000, would that all have been inclusive probably?
They never actually got me anything in writing to tell me what they would do, to be honest. And that was another reason that I kind of moved away from that. No doubt, they would have provided more detail than what this is going to do, but I think for the stage that we're in, maybe that's a reasonable way to begin.
You've
this.
acted reports back from the people.
I have, and they've been responsive, even just the idea of me asking for an estimate and asking for their credentials and things to share with the commissioners to make a choice as to whether to invest with them or not, so and it's 5,000 as opposed to 40. So,
I think a lot of our concern too with the city is the idea was tossed around perhaps closing, I think it's Prairie Street, for bringing that in. And I mean, that's our number one truck entrance. And we're doing everything we can to keep the trucks out of town for our infrastructure. And the elevator managers have made it clear, they tell 99% of the trucks to exit that way. And whether we purchase land on the east side, the west side, whatever, but I sure think we need to keep Prairie Street open. I mean, to speak for the council, I guess. I don't think any of us are necessarily on board with that.
Yeah, that was another big concern. We've done everything we can to keep them off our city streets, so our cost is lower, and shutting that down would really affect that. If we did have the spur that run clear down to Sandyland.
Well,
And
we
that's-
only have,
I
we
think
only have
that's-
two south entrances out,
Yeah.
or exits out of town, and
And that's-
entrances, and
that's
that's our
why we-
number one.
Talked about, having to go clear down there, why not do something closer to the railroad tracks?
Don't have a free quarter of ground.
Right.
2 million a mile.
But we
2
also
million a
thought,
mile just
what we
boggles
spent
my
on-
mind that we
on
can
rail
build
tracks.
railroad tracks for 2 million a mile to buy.
It was kind of our understanding that the railroads are kind of looking for spurs
Oh, no.
that are 2 miles long or a mile and a half, to where they can, instead of chopping up trains, they can park long trains. So the only way that'd be feasible to lay track out there is to work something out with the railroad to where we'd let them run 2 rails to park trains on, and they'd have to supply us a rail to get out there, because there's no way the county can
Right.
do 2 million,
knew the overall cost too, we could, that's part of it is, I don't know if it's a $4 million or a $9 million project. If we knew what that estimated cost is, then you can kind of break down, just like we did with the grocery store project. How much can you get in grants? How much do you get from the essentially rent of using the facility? And can you make it, the way that we worked it with the grocery store is that, the TIF and the city, the city did make a contribution to it, but the annual cost of it is a break even to get the business going, to get it to, that was the, we're probably gonna have to look at some things similar with whatever business we're dealing with, if we don't get involved in the recruiting of it in some way, it's not gonna happen organically. That's my take on it.
What's the location in Stafford? Is that the old Burton Weta, or is that the one on the west?
One on the west side of the Stafford Elmwood Road,
Yeah, okay.
which is now Tyson, and they've
I
closed.
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Agrex or whatever.
Yeah, it was Agrex, and
Yeah.
now it's owned by Tyson.
I think, the site comparisons are gonna bring out those kinds of things too, like what are the impact gonna be on city streets? Because just like you're talking about, there would be ones, on locations in St. John, Stafford would have the same thing with the location near there. But that's what this analysis is intended to draw out.
Is there a price on that facility?
I have no idea.
No, just starting to look. I mean, this deal is gonna have to be heavily funded by grants.
Right.
And then the grant company's coming in because the city doesn't have the money. And the county doesn't have the money to spend a whole lot. So, I mean, it's gonna have to all just kind of come together if it works. But I mean, a person always needs to be looking at different things, possibilities, instead of just sitting here and saying it'll take care of itself.
Is it currently for sale or not? No, you don't know.
It's well-kept secret. It was a well-kept secret when it was a bone meal plant.
Right.
I see. Yeah.
So,
Uh,
but the thing that I think we should look at, and you only have 84 or 87 responses out of this, but to me, these three go hand in hand, is the lack of business, the lack of jobs, and the population is declining. The cities and the counties got to do something. If we keep this trend, there's not going to be anything around for anyone, to do. We just will close the doors on the county as well as the cities. So I think, from my opinion, I think we need to start doing something, try to attract more business, thus more jobs, thus less decline in population. I forget what the average age of the Stafford County residents are, but I think they're all well over Medicare eligibility age. So, I'm looking at you guys, some of the city council members over in Stafford are younger. But I think we need to move off the bubble. We've got to do something. And I think by starting this, then maybe we can get a better picture. And who knows, maybe somebody else will come in and say, okay, you've done some groundwork. The thing is, you build it, they'll come. I always look at it as someone chooses a site and then will say, it's going to take us a couple of years to find out whether we can do this or not. So I think we need to be a little proactive here.
You may not have this info yet, but on the warehouse, how many potential jobs could that create? Or,
Warehouse-wise, I think it just very much depends on what warehouse
how?
how grain loading facility, I think that something in the neighborhood of 30 jobs is a reasonable estimate. And probably a lot of warehouses would probably find themselves in that same kind of vicinity. maybe this, we have several other pieces of data that we thought might help kind of inform this discussion too, that maybe I can share some of this for food for thought at this point. So kind of that point that a lot of this is very interconnected. We have housing stuff on there. We've got, you know, and we could all probably have a whole discussion about housing. I'll start with one. We've got two different pieces of data on housing. This one talks about rental housing and census data. And I may have failed to highlight. No. Okay, so So the first page, highlighted, it's zip code 67576. If you look on the second page, I mean, there's more than just this statistic to look at, so feel free to absorb it. But one of them I think is significant, is the 15.6% of our inventory of housing in St. John is rental housing. Compare that to what a standard is statewide. So the second page, Kansas, you flip it over and it's 33%. That's why it's hard to find a rental house here.
Does that include places like Sedgwick County with apartment complexes?
Yeah, everywhere, but this is data that is specific to let me have to share. I thought I had more copies of this. Condition of housing. We just did a grant application that asked us what the vacancy rate here in St. John is. And it's higher than the state average. It's probably on your first sheet. I can't remember now exactly, but
Right there.
okay, there, 17%. So that looked higher. It looked like you've got plenty of housing available if you've got a vacancy rate that high. But looking at this, it's because 13% of our housing is in an uninhabitable or poor condition, according to the appraiser. We got a lot of vacant houses that are really not suitable to live in. One of them that we thought, I think Ashley and Hannah brought some additional information. We actually even just met with a workforce agency today. Kansas Workforce One had a meeting in Stafford and was talking about ways that we could better connect the idea of high school students with what, like being prepared for what kind of jobs are available in this area upon graduation. Really kind of helping them see that they can have job opportunities here. But here's some of the challenges. We have a 2% unemployment rate. So even while we say we need jobs, what we're also hearing from employers is the difficulty in filling the jobs that they've got. I could probably name a dozen different farmers and custom harvesters I know that are bringing people from South Africa in the H-2A program. We were dealing with a contractor last week that's not going to be able to meet expected deadlines for completion of things because he's lost a couple of employees and hasn't found replacements yet. We have a workforce program or a work training program at our incubator, and we've got people, we're working with them and so forth, but we'd expected to have a lot more, I'll put it that way. So there's a challenge there. This thing that we we handed out was some kind of detail on what the workforce is here and what the industries are that are growing. And really, we might have to give some thought, I would submit anyway, to the idea that if we want to cultivate more jobs and more workforce, we may have to couple that with particular training programs to help create the workforce availability for the industry that we recruit, depending on what it is. So some of the things that are growing the most, according to this, are transportation and warehousing. I think that kind of bodes well with some of the discussion we've had. And the other biggest one is healthcare. But regardless, I mean, there might be a place for, if we were setting goals about the idea of we want to create more jobs, we want to retain more population, we might need to be more focused in how we do that to make sure that we've got things that are feeding the pipeline. You have all of them, warehousing and storage. They expect the short-term growth in that to be 20.4%. That's on the first page. To me, it's the big standout. Yeah, looking at long-term growth, that's on the second page. The two that are the highest are, if I'm not mistaken, personal care and service occupations. I understood that that includes
Page 49.
page 49. Okay. So, you know, some of those, they'll be hard for us to figure out how to, you know, develop a good pipeline into, you know, management of companies and I mean, I guess depending on how that's interpreted. Small companies, sure, but we're not going to probably recruit the headquarters of a major corporation here, but we might look at, say, in healthcare, one of the things we've been doing is keeping in communication and actually writing some formal letters of you know, support for some of the grants that they're doing and some commitments to cooperate. But Dodge City Community College is creating what they call a university center, giving people the opportunity to get a 4-year degree locally without having to, you know, go to any of the other places that you get a 4-year degree around here. So there are degrees that, you know, you can get online completely, but there's a lot of them you still have to go to campus for, and nursing would be one of those that typically you either have to be there or do an ITV type thing. So by working with them, we'll have the opportunity to have the ITV outlet here in Stafford County. They wouldn't even have to drive to Dodge City, let alone not have to drive to Hayes or Manhattan or Wichita or KU. So we could work to develop those kinds of things, even, you know, they're just fledgling right now, but that's what I'm kind of getting at, is the idea of some connection between what we're focusing on as our growth goals and what we do to match ourselves up to succeed in that, you know, what kind of, so, you know, any one of these. We could take a lot of time to like delve into this and learn more. I know we're not gonna do all of that tonight, but I thought just again, some flavor of it. This one talks about where does our tax base come from in Stafford County? And I know you guys work around this routinely, and at the same time, it might be broken out in a way that you don't always see to know that, you know, what is really driving. I think the one that seems to me a lot of people are surprised by is the fact that public utilities are as big a piece of pie as they are. You know, we collect more from public utilities than we do, well, it depends on the year. But yeah, oil and gas, and sometimes more than residential, and certainly more than commercial, by far. You know, so we could set goals that are related to improving tax collections from commercial sources as a way to stabilize budgets through the cycles of ag and oil. We could set specific goals toward that if we, you know, kind of had a consensus around what that is.
That's certainly a big issue after a day like today, too.
Okay. What?
Oil and gas
Oh.
went off 7%.
So, and then it seems to me like as we would kind of go through, well, how are we going to do that? It might be useful to know how we compare in some of the ways that a company that pays a lot, you know, has a lot of capital investment, pays a lot in property taxes. Well, they're going to probably pay attention to this kind of stuff. And I thought I had 15 of these. There's some stuff together for. But I sometimes hear too, like, oh, our taxes are so much higher than Reno County, or Barton counties are so much higher. And these are an average, so it does matter specific location to specific location. But this, I think, was kind of, to me, it was interesting to be able to compare. I highlighted just some of the surrounding counties and maybe kind of the high and low. But just kind of what is our average mill rate at that point in time compared to some of our surrounding counties. And if similar to kind of like utility rates, we did talk with Greg Wright, asking him to give us, he didn't get it to us though in time for this meeting, but some information about the utility rates here. He has information on surrounding areas and kind of using that to, again, just help us be more educated about how we rank and what maybe our strategy would be if we were to be trying to recruit a company that either we just wanted to locate here or we wanted to sell electricity to or whatever. So I've thrown several things at you. What are you thinking now?
I mean, as far as that spur goes, I think we're going in the right direction because we're a farming, ranching, oil and gas community. So I mean, that would obviously help, you know, with the farming. So I think that we should focus on that as a group together is what this community is about. So I'd just say we needed to start discussing that spur pretty good. I'm all for it. My biggest thing is if we're going to be investing into it and spending our community's money towards that, I wanted to see something coming back to us with utilities. I mean, electricity is what brings in most of our money. So I mean, that's how I look at it.
capturing things. Guys, I hope.
When are they gonna do the site study on
What's
those?
that?
When's the site study gonna be done on those?
Well, I haven't actually given him the 3 sites. So, okay, if we were to kind of delve into the details of that particular project, there's only one site that we actually have control over, you know. I don't know that any of the other owners are actually willing to work with us. So, it's not that we can't approach those people, but that's some of the the things that we would have to work through on any of the, you know, there's variables on no matter what. And I don't know if you want to develop a committee that kind of delves into some of those details, divvies out some responsibilities. You know, when we talk about the idea of landowners, it might be that one person over another has a relationship that makes it a person, you know, the better match to initiate those conversations. Might be one example. Or, you know, if we know straight up that, I'll just say Stafford because that's not the group here, but you know, if Stafford's saying no way, no how, do we want trucks going down our street? We're not working with you. Well, then we should figure that out before we have somebody, you know, do the site study on it, I guess, or at least have a pretty good idea, you know.
The deal with Stafford, where you guys say you have one entrance, 2 entrances coming in from the south side of town, if they build that spur at Stafford, say 50% of the grain comes from south of town, 50% of those semis are gonna be running straight up Main Street. And they might not want that.
I guess I just can't get past is every big project you see, they bring the project to the railroad, not the railroad to the project. I mean, I just can't get past building 2.5 miles of rail access, and then they store cars on them, so we close 2 mile lines in the township, or we're blocking them. I mean, I just can't get past, I can't think of anywhere that I've ever drove by and thought, oh, there's 3 miles of rail spur access to that location. The dollars we're talking about, the quarter of ground seems like the easy part, but maybe I'm missing it.
Does it go down the half-mile line?
Pardon?
It goes down the half-mile line, though.
Well, I know, but the east and west roads will be blocked, then if they're storing cars on 2 miles of rail track.
No, east and west will be blocked.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, when they did the feasibility study for the grocery store, did you tell them to go look at that certain location, or did you, because what I'm looking at is, can you just tell them to do a study out there on the junction, and one just where they see is the absolute most fit in the whole county, and then we get a committee together to try to make that location work? I mean, can you do that?
You could, yeah, I suppose you could. In the case of the grocery study, to answer that question directly, was it Old Joe's Electric building at the time was being offered for sale. I mean, it had a real estate sign on it. It was one of the locations. It was the least preferred according to the analyst. And then we had, of course, the old Dillon's building. And then I think at the time that we did that, I did have an indication that that would be a possibility too. I don't remember for sure, but I think that Lawrence Gillespie had already told me that he would be open to that. And so it was one of them that was specifically looked at in the study. So, but
That's my opinion, it's just that they should know where it would be the most feasible, that would be the most successful, best at. And so that's what my opinion on it is.
Of course, Kyle might know what dust blowing on his house from a grain facility right outside of town all summer long. That would be a concern. I mean, every site has pros and cons. You know, I mean, every city would like it in their city. I mean, me personally, I'd like it up by radian. Yeah.
I would think they could do the feasibility study wherever you told them to do it, and then working to get the ground if that's where they deemed it was best, but.
Push comes to shove, both, I mean, I don't even want to say this word because I don't think anybody wants to lead with this. You want to work with people who want to work with you, right? But push comes to shove, both of your entities have eminent domain.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to answer your question.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
No.
you don't, So, you'd rather talk with someone up front and know that they're open to.
Would the Port Authority Board that we used to have any connection to this?
Yeah, they could totally be the entity that owns and carries this out. The thing is, they don't have even a bank account. They have zero assets to do anything with. So, I think the county's involvement to get it going is going to be needed. But it might be the most sensible entity that has control over it and manages it on an ongoing basis.
You know, I definitely agree that this is something to be looking into, and, you know, the study that we're gonna do is fairly cheap. You know, if they came down to where there's one site is better than all the others, I'm sure we're gonna have to spend more money on the study. But I mean, I think we need to keep looking at other options. What I don't wanna happen is one day we wake up and we go, well, we got so much money into this deal, we can't quit now.
Well,
You know what I mean? I mean,
You know, and I think going forward, I don't think you can just bank on the one, whether it's a grain facility. I mean, because you're only gonna raise, if you're talking about commercial properties as part of the value, you're gonna have to search out other types of businesses other than just this one. I mean, this one's not gonna solve the whole county issue. It's gonna be a small dent in it.
yeah.
So, I mean, I'm saying not necessarily focus 100% on this one, just as a grain facility or a warehouse down there or wherever.
Are you saying, think about laying it out such that growth using that rail is possible? Because, you know,
Right.
we get site selection, you know, like, well, one came to us just today, and, you know, you never know. They always call it some code word. This one happened to be Operation Milk Jug or whatever. I mean, you know, it's a manufacturing facility. I would guess they maybe make something that's related to the dairy industry, but I don't, you know, packaging or whatever is my guess. But, you know, they have certain criteria that they're looking for when they are looking for a site. And a lot of times they'll say, rail served. This one actually they wanted to have something near a transload facility. So if we had that, we could submit for those kinds of things. We don't really even have an industrial park, period, in the county that is ready to market.
Well, just like this, I mean, with this one, if the pellet mill in Stafford would come available, well, that does absolutely no good for us. You know, we're probably not gonna invest in it. It would make more sense that Stafford does. So then we're still in a dilemma that we need to invest in something that's gonna help benefit St. John. You know, I mean, so not just, that's why I'm saying, this site study that you do, they may say, well, that pellet mill is the greatest place in the world because they've already got rail access. Does absolutely nothing for the city of St. John. You know, yeah, it boosts the county, but it doesn't in turn really give anything back to the city.
the county's already spent the money on the 5,000, so
Right,
we're not asking
right.
you to pay for it.
And I understand that, but I'm just saying, you know, I mean, us meeting here discussing this, and they say, well, that pellet mill's the best place. Well, you guys are gonna take your meeting and go to Stafford and see if you can work with Stafford. You know, because that would only make sense that Stafford and the county get together on what they can do for each other. That's why I'm saying we also need to look out for the city of St. John if it goes that way. You know, something that's gonna help us in the long run as well.
So I don't know if this is the time to show you this kind of stuff. I don't know how much time you want to allocate to this tonight, but I thought that as we were talking about this, it might be such that, you know, we talk about more than just the rail kind of thing. And I think we've kind of more focused on that, and that's fine. But we all know that there's some interconnected stuff here, you know, like if we had 30 more jobs, we're kind of struggling with, are there enough houses for the people that want to live here as it is? You know, housing is going to be a piece of that if we actually are able to develop that kind of facility. So it might be that we have more than one goal that we work on at the same time. I printed off some examples, and they're long, so I didn't print a copy for each, but maybe you can kind of thumb through them and pass them around as an example. So, I don't know, there's Great Bend and Lenexa. Okay, yeah, I know, it's long, it's Lenexa, but if you look at it, what I thought was good about this one, and I don't know, maybe it's not going to be conducive to passing around because they are long. It's really pretty actually basic. They have find the title page. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what they call umbrella issues. They're bigger priorities: safety, financial, opportunities for all, environment, and intergovernmental and private coordination. And then they kind of show a process where they, you know, included citizens in determining how, you know, what their goals were. So there were committees, but then, okay, I'll just take the very first one. Goal, they have a goal. This one is to make Lenexa a city of trees with aesthetically pleasing landscaping in every neighborhood, commercial area, traffic way, and park. So there's their goal, and then within it they have strategies that are, you know, just specific activities. They're going to establish a uniform tree planting program. They're going to have landscape ordinances. They're going to encourage wildlife conservation. Okay, so you get the idea. There's like 6 different strategies they're doing with that goal. It's really pretty, I mean, you could copy that, I think, pretty easily for a housing goal, that format, you know? So yeah, it's long, but it's really, I thought, pretty copyable. Great Bends, they go into a lot of detail about their process, and they put a lot of emphasis in the public process. And their style of strategic plan is more pictorial. It's more like a magazine, I guess. But it similarly, though, lays out in writing what their agreed to goals are. And the last one I printed off is an example of, it doesn't have to be 50 pages long. This one is Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center, and it's 5 pages long. Okay.
This one basically gives you all the information that the other ones do, but it's broken down in such a way that's easy to digest.
Yeah.
Very easy to
So
digest.
I thought about, okay, what if we had started with the grocery store and we had decided to have that as like a written out strategy goal? What would it have had in it? So we might have considered that to be lack of business, is the overall priority we're addressing here. And the goal is to establish a grocery store. And the strategies, I could have filled like 2 sheets with just the strategies, because we did a lot of different stuff all together on that. I don't have it necessarily, we had a study. We established site control. We wrote grants. We secured a memorandum of understanding with the businesses involved. We established a TIF district. That in and of itself, I know some of you are involved in that and some of you haven't. That was like 12 votes altogether of the city council over the course of time. And so I think maybe there is some value in knowing that, there's like an agreed to goal, and the idea that, say we did this. I mean, I think that if we were to have strategies, we'd probably also kind of determine who's responsible for what. And something might affect the city more than it affects the county, or economic development would be the one that's writing the grants, but the city is really the one that's got the lead in TIF districting. It would provide some predictability to how we go about attacking these kinds of things. And another thing is, I think maybe this is what Great Bend in particular really gets at with a lot of it did a lot of coalition building. But kind of to I don't know, point that someone made here, but the idea that you don't want to spend money that the public's going to be critical of. And we all agree, but if you've gone through a process of, maybe having the public involved, there's some more agreement on that it is an effort worth making, then it doesn't put you as much at risk at the point that you take a vote to move forward on it in whatever way. It's kind of like, I remember having some discussions with someone a few years ago about the school board. This person said the school board should just vote to write or to fund a recreation building. And I said, without doing the groundwork, that's going to be a lot of risk for the school board to just go vote to build a building. You don't want to put them in that position of being at risk. It needs to be like it's something that's already been vetted. People are comfortable with it. The political risk isn't in front of you as much when you actually go through that voting process. They understand the why or the trade-offs, the discussion of it, We even kind of did that with the grocery store, actually. We had a committee that informed, made recommendations to the city council, but it might be something that helps you all not have the full brunt of responsibility, if you know what I mean.
I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you turned and looked at that board, you printed off like a ton of information that it's hard to take in. I feel like, did you have a plan? Do you have a vision or something? You brought in really good numbers, statistics and stuff. If you were to read that board, what would you throw at us right now that we can help you as in the economic development? What can we do?
I think, okay, I'm going to throw at you one more. And whether you follow this or something similar to it. Thought I printed off more copies of this. Okay, so this was put together by Jan Peters, who is the former Economic Development Director in Great Bend. And I actually kind of asked her, as kind of in the course of preparing for this meeting, there's kind of a blank slate here. How do we go about this? And she brainstormed with me, but it is kind of one of those things too that sometimes facilitating and participating is hard. I wondered if she would be available to help with this. Well, she is available to consult if we were to put together a process that really creates a simple document, I think we're looking at something that's more like, that Northwest Kansas Innovation Center, something 10 pages or less. But it might be that, we have a goal in housing, we have a goal in job creation, we have a goal in industrial development, and we have a committee that kind of informs that, gets into the detail of the data, because I think there's sometimes some complexity to some of these situations, like the workforce stuff, that conundrum that we're in, that we need jobs, that's why people move away, but we can't fill the jobs we already got open right now. I mean, so it's a little more complex than just giving some tax breaks to a company you hope locates here. And maybe a committee is a place that's more appropriate to get into that. And similarly, even with the industrial port kind of thing, that could also get into a lot of detail, maybe more so than what we want to tackle tonight. Maybe that's something we also take a committee to delve into a little more in depth and recommend things to the commission. I think at this point it's fair to say that the commission is more in the lead for that particular project.
Who would you like to see on the board? I mean, how many or from where?
I haven't thought about.
Before we do a feasibility study, though, we include somebody from Stafford. It's kind of hard to decide who you'd want to tackle that.
I haven't prescribed exactly who. I mean, I think that some representation from business would be good in farming. Okay, so there's one of those that are in farming should be a natural, we want them to understand what this would bring. And number one thing is, probably increase the basis 8 to 10 cents. I think depending on the year and all that kind of stuff, but I think that's the number that's been thrown to me at one point. Well, you want the ag community to understand what this is how it's going to impact them. I think what we ought to avoid is kind of like a Tyson situation. If you guys know about the Tyson facility in Tonganoxie, on one hand, you could have filled this sheet with all the economic impact that kind of thing might have brought to that area. But because they hadn't done the groundwork, there was this, wait a minute, I don't think I'm ready for that. And ideally, we can not have that here. Yeah, I mean, and if you looked even beyond the whole idea of a site, a port kind of thing. I mean, a lot of job creation thing could be that way. So for example, we've talked about this in commission meeting a couple times. There is a ban on the books for dairy and hogs in Stafford County. And it was done in the 1990s. I don't think it's very top of mind to the public now, but you'd want to go through a process of talking with the public before you made a change to that. If it is the case that the public doesn't have the strong feelings against it that they did before, it might be a job creation opportunity. Maybe even more so than dairy and pigs. One of the things that's been pointed out to me in the past is poultry. I actually spent some time talking to a professor at K-State that's been doing work with the poultry industry in Arkansas, which is supposedly looking for places to expand outside of that area. Well, I don't know how we all feel about that here, actually. It might be something that would be accepted, and it might not. I don't know. Poultry meaning as in the multiplying of genetics. So it wouldn't be like poultry processing. It'd be hatching chicks and sending them to, places where they grow them. But at least that's what those discussions at the time had said was something that's an area potentially of opportunity. Even within the rail thing, you know, I mean, could probably be more or less specific in what kind of goals we have for what kind of industry we're targeting.
Who's on your economic development board? Do you have 7?
We have 7.
And they're spread out through all of Stafford County.
2 are here tonight. Amanda Staub and Tabra Ward are 2. I think Josh Meyer peeked his head into, they may finish their board meeting, but Josh Meyer is on through the remainder of this year. His term expires. There's also Taylor Skinner from Maxville, John Deal from Stafford, Jamie Kreitzer from Stafford, and Alice Vosberg, our president, from Maxville.
I guess I'm just
Well,
wondering, do we need another committee, or could
Well,
that committee do it?
here's the thing, yes, but our board has 0 funds to put towards any of this. 0 authority to, you know, unless we're working with the city or the county or whatever to, you know, get a TIF district that brings the funding back in, and that's how we're funding, you know, I mean, the debt is held by economic development for the grocery store, but it's the TIF district that the city authorized that's feeding those funds into economic development to carry that out. So we really can't carry out much unless we've got the cooperation of some of the other entities. Yeah. Any of it, yeah. We really need the cooperation of whatever entity is relevant to the project at hand.
Legally, you could only have 1 commissioner and 2 council members to be legal to meet with that board. Or you'd be violating the open meeting law. It would be, maybe the economic development could come up with the plans a little bit, and we could meet together to, again, as a group, to, after you have something, to see whether we approve that, but I know it'd be nice to know right while you were doing it, whether
Well, that's the, yeah, we want
That's
to
the
bring
problem.
something to you that
you've already kind of known.
you've already know that there's some
With-
buy-in on. You know, that process creates the buy-in, and
With the open meeting law, that's impossible.
What do you need? I guess I thought, I was under the impression the whole reason that council was coming tonight was to pay for this feasibility study and talk about the closing of the road or getting the rail spur. I mean, I guess our big thing was, or my big thing was Prairie Street, and then the $20,000 for minimal benefit. I mean, people that are gonna work at this so-called grain facility may live in St. John, they might not even live in the county. But I mean, what do you need, or what do you need from us to, I mean, I just feel like it's a county issue, I guess. We're on board, I think everybody, Maxville City Council, Stafford City Council, everybody wants growth for the county. I mean, we're all in the same boat, or that's the way I feel.
actually, I will say, I think no matter what, if you chose a location south of St. John, we would have to connect with, I mean, the actual rail goes through city limits of St. John. So unless you went like west a ways or whatever, or east a ways, which I don't think that the terrain allows for that, we are gonna have to work with the city of St. John.
But just the biggest issue was investing, which obviously isn't the case now, but investing $20,000 and it being way out there.
With no direct benefit to the city.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our biggest
issue.
issue.
And that's why, like, we weren't gonna send you to them and then you come back and forth, so that was.
Yeah.
It was like when you started writing up there, I was kind of confused because I thought it was mostly like Ross just said, you know, the spur. I think a lot of this would be really beneficial as far as if you came back to us in just the city, because I don't see where they can use their resources to invest in St. John only, or in us invest into the county, or, you know.
Would you be willing to do something where we are kind of establishing some priorities and the idea that what the city does do, or what, you know, like,
I would think that you'd want to wait and see what the study says before you get going too much.
even like housing or anything else like that?
Oh, yeah, the housing. Yeah.
I just see it as connected. We gotta
Yeah.
do both if we're gonna do, although we can just focus on, maybe,
Yeah.
do you
No,
guys
you're
wanna just
right, you're
focus
right.
tonight?
But I don't wanna see Maxwell and Stafford getting mad if they're starting to use some of their money and their resources in St. John only, you know? So that's what I'm saying, if you came to us and we started kind of looking into what plan we can do, and if we're willing to invest into it and the other towns aren't, then they should be willing to help us with whatever they can. You know, that's the way I see it. If I'm wrong, I mean, tell me. But
I think no matter what we do, anything that we do here, you know, is going to be beneficial all for the county of Stafford. I think what we need to do is just establish what it is exactly what we want to do. We've already started something with the land bank by doing what we have with the property and giving that over to economic development. As you said earlier, this all goes hand in hand. Jobs go hand in hand with housing. Housing goes hand in hand with everything else. It's just a domino effect that goes on to it. We just need to establish exactly what it is that we need to do first. But like you said a moment ago, they all can be done simultaneously. It's just we need to establish what it is that we want to do.
Yeah.
So if we were to put like a community vision plan together like Great Bend did, I mean, looking through here, that's pretty good numbers. I mean, what could we put in ours that would attract businesses, you know, just tell them we have land and we have the availability for a TIF district and we have, you know, maybe a cost break on electricity, or, I mean, what can we put in our vision plan that would attract somebody else? Because, I mean, looking at theirs and then looking at ours
Right.
wouldn't attract very many,
Right.
you know, commercial businesses to town.
And we may not compete with all of them. It may be
Right.
that, you know, we have to be very targeted. I don't know. But I think the idea, like, the TIF, for example, is a two-step process. And we all did it all as, you know, bang, bang, bangs. It felt like one process because we just did them very sequentially, very close in time to each other. But there's actually a process. You first set up a district, and then when you have a project that is planning to utilize it in that district, you set up a TIF plan for that particular development. Well, for example, we could have a TIF district established and something that we could actively present as available, and it's a certainty that it is. There's also, and again, I don't know how much to get into all these kinds of things, but that would to me be something we could kind of delve into if we had like a housing committee, but there's things that are called rural housing incentive districts, RHID, and it works a lot like a TIF, but if we wanted someone to build an apartment complex or something like that, might be the same, or if you wanted to build another street like Centennial and you needed a way to pay for the street, a rural housing incentive district can take the property taxes that are over and above, you know, it's kind of the same thing as the TIF, over and above what the base is, and that is used to pay for the infrastructure associated with that housing development. There's some tools, I mean, there's some tools that we're not using that are out there. Are we gonna be able to meet all that Great Bend is?
Sure, yeah, but I mean,
No.
just
But-
yeah. Just curious.
You know, this earlier isn't county, but I mean, it's more city. You know, we really don't have, I mean, what did you say our unemployment rate is about 2?
It's about 3%. 3.2
3%.
is the,
So I mean, we're not gonna be able to draw in big business or industry much. But I mean, when we're close to Hutch, Pratt, Great Bend, should say, would it be a terrible deal if St. John was known for good housing? You know, live in St. John, drive to Great Bend to work, come back and send the kids here and buy groceries here? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah, it's not.
This housing,
It's not a terrible deal.
study,
You know,
Carol,
You know, I mean, you don't have
do
to
you have
go
access to
hard
that?
farms,
Like, can you
hotels,
go in there
all
and
the time. You got the
cut the
housing, nice
state
housing,
average to
and
under
kids
10,000
are-
population in the county and
We are
see
in
what
a
the
place
percentage
to
of
live.
rentals is
Right,
for the
right.
state
Well, yeah,
average? I mean,
just-
it seems a little skewed
Need to get it down.
comparing the state average to a county,
Get better
Yeah.
housing.
doesn't it?
I
Or am
can't,
missing
the
it?
answer to your question directly is I cannot manipulate that data that
Okay,
way.
I was just curious. I mean, I guess I figured it would be higher than 33% for the state average, to be honest. I figured it would be dramatically higher. I mean, I wonder what Sedgwick County, I could probably Google it
You
and
could,
find out.
yeah, you could look county by county.
Right.
Other counties. But I can't sort it such that it is a county with 10,000 and less.
Then we'll go from there. I think as far as our side, the study's gonna be done.
Mhm.
So we'll see from the results from that and go from there. But I think as far as our side, we're done.
Okay.
We can adjourn. You guys still have city business to do, right? No?
No. No.
So, okay.
And I actually think, you know, I mean, without seeing what the site study is, I mean, the one specific project, there's not really anything other than maybe us looking through data and discussing at our next meeting of maybe what our long-term vision plan
I
or
think
something like
once
that.
you're aware of what the results is, then you can, whatever community it is, you
Right.
can start with our housing and
Right.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is you would rather do separate planning as opposed to a countywide kind of integrated process?
I just don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, we're
I
not
mean, we're just not there.
I mean, if they
There's nothing
come out and say the spot right outside of St. John's the best spot there is and don't even look at
Right.
anything else, then
Then I think
see
that's
what
where
we
city
can
and
do,
county
what you
can
guys
work
can do.
together.
that- Yeah. And
But if they go
look-
to Stafford, then I
Right.
think it would be something that the
But
county
our
and Stafford
goal
would.
is to benefit the county.
Right.
We don't have the
Right.
benefits.
Right. 100%.
And our goal would be to help benefit the city when it was close and work with the county. I think that would be all the cities. I mean,
But if you say, for example, if it did wind up, say, in St. John, does St. John have the workforce to satisfy all the requirements of that facility? You're gonna have other workers from other parts of the county coming in. Conversely, St. John, or Stafford the same way. I mean, it's going to be,
It'll still benefit.
it'll benefit the county.
It'll be a symbiotic relationship with everything. If you have a business, no matter where you put it, it's going to draw people from each of those cities to that. And it's going to benefit everyone in the long run. We just have to figure out, once they have the information and they know what's going on, we will get that information, and we can kind of figure out what we want to do, you know, with the next phase.
So we're comfortable with the sites. Stafford, close to St. John, Sandyland. We move forward with that. And
I
then.
haven't heard any other.
Is that,
Yeah, I like East deal too. I mean, I don't know counties, I'm not over around Maxville much, but if Maxville has a location as well, I mean, I don't think East wrong to ask them on, I don't know what that, I don't know, like you pay by the square mile, this is a countywide paid study, I mean,
Yeah,
they look at an
$5,000
aerial
he's
map
looked at.
and
He's
they
looked-
say radium's the best and Todd's happy.
Oh, I
mean,
see.
I don't, I haven't drove around the county and thought, well, that's a good spot, there's railway there. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's right.
It's like, what if all three spots are bad? I mean, there's got to be one spot they point out and they say, this is going to work out great right here within this mile or whatever, is what I'm envisioning. I don't know if that's realistic, but
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to
I mean,
see.
the rail
Not-
runs
not
right through the
just-
county. I mean, it runs
not
right through the
just
middle of
three.
it. There's not only three spots
But,
that.
you know, disregarding the railroad, the prime spot is Sandyland. 'Cause you got 281 and Highway 50 right there.
What is it, what's the problems for getting access off of Highway 50 and Highway 281? The state will just grant you a big turning lane and 3 driveways in and out and a truck.
No,
lives
no,
up?
no,
I don't think that's how it works.
It would be a half mile from the intersection.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be right on the intersection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying,
We-
Right, no, I understand.
I think
It
we'd
did-
have a lot of pluses for being Stafford County, where
There's-
we're centrally located in the
Right.
state. We have
Right.
2 major highways. Our rail line that runs through here is a lot better than the rail line that runs through Great Bend, because I think they have a speed limitation from Ellenwood clear to the Colorado border of like 35 miles an hour, because the tracks are so bad. Wow. Yeah.
You're right.
I mean, yeah, we're in agreement on that aspect. It's, they mean the junction. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And, you know, I don't know if this is something to consider, but we went on a field trip to Garden City. I don't know, it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago now. Oh, we're.
6 years.
That's right.
yeah.
We both went. So the company that we're working with actually designed that track out there. And I printed off an aerial of that facility. And the area that, you know, if you looked at this whole page is the size of the facility that exists now. The part that we looked at is the ethanol plant and the grain loading facility was just like a little bit on the corner of it. It has expanded that much. It's got the wind turbines, and it's got now, they're putting in a facility that is doing ultra-fine ground beef is their newest thing now, but anyway, they have added the track on over time. If we had this built down to 280, the track's already there, then you start trying to develop it, I guess.
It would attract other businesses coming in. They talked about all those wind turbines looking for a place to put them. I said, we got the perfect spot, but nothing happened. You could have filled up the whole quarter with what they got out there at Garden City.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as far as out in the junction goes, I mean, I think, speaking for councils, like, we're having a problem with closing that. I mean, the railroad, was it last year wanted us to close that intersection, Marshall?
Yeah.
We weren't for that at all. I'm just laying that out there now. I mean, we're watching out for our roads is basically what we're watching out for, but we're not closing that down. So I'm just putting that out there.
That road's closed on the side of 50, isn't it? So your main concern is just from there to Old 50?
Yeah.
So if a guy bought enough dry land to run the tracks beside that road, that would solve your problem?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
care what
just
you
as
do
long
once
as we
you get
have an
down to Old
entrance,
50, you know, I mean, south of there on county stuff, I mean, but that is for that half mile or whatever from the edge of town,
5
from
minutes.
by your place to Old 50.
Yeah, just buy access on, or easement on the dry land, bring it in.
Oh, that's on your side, isn't it?
Do what?
That's on your side.
You'd surely go on the east side, wouldn't you?
Well, then you'd have to have
Be
the
the
traffic cross the railroad to get to 281, wouldn't you?
Well, you're gonna bring it in on the west side, and then that street will have to cross it either way. You'd surely bring the rail spur in on the east side of that half mile line, wouldn't you?
I think so.
I don't know.
You know why? I don't know why you'd want to cross the road twice.
Except it's irrigated ground on the east side and it's dry land on the west side.
Well, I guess.
Well, just
Oh,
take your
there's one
shop
quarter
out.
there. Oh,
Yeah.
right there, there's 1/4 there.
Hey, Ross is
We're
willing to
getting
sell
ahead
for
of
the
the
right.
It's all been part of it.
Well, so,
But I mean,
yeah, I don't
think-
know how much of this you want to hash through before we have the engineer
Yeah, we just need
look
to.
at it, you know?
We just need to
That
kind of get to
Stafford
going
location is
and
gonna be
look
hard to
at.
beat.
Pardon?
I said, that Stafford location is gonna be hard to beat. It was picked once, obviously.
I just don't know if the Stafford people are gonna let that many semis coming
access.
down through
Yeah.
center town.
They got
That is true.
going up.
I mean, they got good roads over there as it is.
Oh, Todd.
Are you ready to adjourn? One of us needs to talk.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to meeting again with you guys over this,
Yeah.
whenever. It's important, so whenever we need to meet again, just get with Jamie and we'll make it work.
You want to take any questions from me?
Yeah, it's your meeting.
That'd be fine with me.
Does the audience have any comments or
questions?
questions?
They only got a lot of jobs.
Talk about the city and electricity, I don't know. We're about maxed out anyway, aren't we? You're not gonna add a whole lot to it unless you spend a lot more money. We're maxed out as far as water to substations,
Given a lot of water.
Yeah, depends on what it was, yeah. I mean, if it was a storage facility, or if it was a vacuum plant, it'd be a whole different deal, water, electricity, yeah, you're right, but depending on what it was.
Okay.
I think we'll adjourn as Board of Commissioners.
Unless we got anything else, okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn as council.
So moved. You gotta have-
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it, so moved.
Second? Second. Motion and a second, all in favor?
I'm right, Charles, about that.
Motion carries.
Meeting
Meeting adjourned.
Money you ever made, so.